We have been very active on the French Bureau Committee on the subject of standard on office keyboards for France, particularly with the support of the French Ministry of Culture and Communication, who have been aware of the matter for a number of years. And let me explain you why. There is no standard on the French keyboard layout, which is an AZERTY keyboard layout, one of the only examples of such a keyboard layout in the world, the other one being Belgium. There was a technical specification in AFNOR in the 1970s, which was a QWERTY-based layout, which was withdrawn. It was an experimental standard, and it was made, interestingly, by a large computer manufacturer from the US who wanted to use the opportunity of moving people from a typewriter to a computer to change the keyboards. That did not happen. So one of the interesting things is that actually nothing much changed when we moved from the typewriter to the computer keyboard so far. The fact that we do not have a standard layout in France also means that there is some diversity on the market, and typically Macintosh has a different layout for signs that are not part of the alphabet or the numbers. And actually there has been many, at least 2 Macintosh keyboard layouts. And none of those layouts adequately covers the needs of French users today. We note that Windows-based keyboard drivers and layouts are more challenged than the others. They have more lacks, more gaps. And we also note that layouts in other Western Francophone countries are all significantly better than the one we have in France. And even some non-Francophone keyboard layouts are better than ours to write French. So that's definitely something that we have to work on. I've talked about the heritage of moving from typewriters to computers. We are now in the 21st century, and the uses that we have for computer keyboards are not necessarily the same as in the 1980s. Systems now support qualitative French texts. They have all the characters that French needs to be written, in terms of spelling, in terms of typography, and that's all in the computer basically. Only the keyboard won't give you access to it. So if you want to publish a book directly from your keyboard, which you can do with modern services, you are not going to be able to do it with a quality spelling and typography if you're going to use a French AZERTY keyboard as it is today. The reality of Europe and globalization today is another thing that has changed. People move around, they go places, they meet people from other cultures, and they are not able in France to write their names properly. And French regional languages also are not supported, which is an issue. And it's a very asymmetrical situation in the sense that most other European keyboard layouts will enable people to appropriately write French names. The Spanish keyboard, for instance, writes French beautifully, and the Portuguese keyboard is even better. But we cannot write a Portuguese name or a Spanish name with the French keyboard. And there are other uses that are not covered. In modern teaching, people are going to use digital screens rather than blackboards. And maths and physics teachers do not have access on the keyboards to signs that they are going to use in math lessons, for instance. And some basic statistics or economic symbols are also lacking. We are not trying to address formula addition there. We're not going to try and replace LaTeX, for instance. We want to have a situation where people can quote a simple formula, a simple equation in a text without having to resort to complicated solutions. We've announced our willingness to work on keyboard layouts in standardization, and there was interesting user responses that you might have stated in other countries as well. The first one is the denial of the issue. People saying that you should not write accents on capitals, which is wrong. People who would say that Mac and Linux layouts do not have problems. Yes, they do. they have less problems than Windows. People rely on automated correction. But automatic correction can fail, and you can want control. So if you want that, you don't have it. Some users have reported migrating to other keyboard layouts, including non-francophone keyboard layouts. For instance, I've heard about a number of people moving to the Portuguese keyboard layout, which is not designed to write French, but writes French better than the French keyboard layout.
I read many about Swiss keyboard.
Yes, which is a francophone or partly francophone keyboard. Yes, people are migrating
the
to
new
a
German
Swiss
keyboard
layout.
does all.
Right.
And some people have developed their own solutions based on their usage and their needs. So you can find here many enriched layouts drivers. Many of them are lacking size because people have had a long, hard look at what was actually useful. And there is an exception to that, which is an alternative Dvorak style keyboard layout called Bepo, after the first 4 letters of the first row of keys. It's an initiative that was started in 2004, but the stable version is dated 2008. It is a free software-based approach. It's based on the corpus analysis and algorithms, and it is the only French keyboard that is complete today in France. If you're not going to want to use the Canadian or the Belgian or the Swiss keyboard layout, and you want to write French with all the signs, that's the only solution that you have. It is, interestingly, supported by a handful of hardware manufacturers, and I think 1 or 2 keyboard manufacturers, and people also provide labels that you can stick to your keyboards to mark the new keyboard layout. And you find drivers available for all systems, and they are included in most new Linux distributions.
So it's available on Windows?
Yes. You have to install a driver, but it's not in the system. You have to install an outside driver.
Okay.
But once you do that, it's called Bepo within your list of drivers.
When you say some hardware support, I think the only hardware thing is the labeling.
Well, no, you can write, you can have a look at the Nishan's keyboard. That's the Bepo keyboard.
You're on Windows or Apple?
He's using Windows, I think. And he has a separate keyboard, an outside keyboard that he plugs into his laptop.
Yeah, but the main, because the scan codes are independent of any keyboard driver, so the only hardware issue is the labeling, which is
yes, and he has Bepo labeling on his keyboard. That's not something that is
stickers.
No, that's not stickers. That's manufactured.
Engraved. It's
engraved. Okay, so that's what it's meant here.
Yeah.
But you can find Bepo engraved keyboards, but it's not so easy.
No,
Yeah.
it's not very easy. It's very expensive.
It's very expensive.
I understand.
It's a $130 keyboard, which is not what most people are ready to pay for. We initialized standardization work in 2014 by consulting with a range of stakeholders, including the Bepo Association. We realized, digging into the matter, that there was no official document in France listing the signs that you have to use to write French. No organization wants to take responsibility for this. There are partial sources, which is the Académie Française, the National Imprimerie Nationale. Some ministries also have documents. And since we identified this gap, on the impulse of Thibault, the Ministry for Cultural Communication has addressed this gap and have actually published a document 15th January this year listing the problems that we have.
But when you say partial sources,
I put some
example
here. Take
Is it in French?
Yes, it's in French only, sorry.
It's partial sources because typically the Académie Française will say you need to put accents on uppercase letters.
yeah.
The ministries will say these are the characters that you need to have to write proper names, for instance. But none of them have actually a list of typographic characters that you need to have. The Imprimerie Nationale has some, but you know,
It has.
all taken together, it's a puzzle and it's a global image.
But the best source I use is the one of the Imprimerie Nationale.
Unfortunately, the Imprimerie Nationale Manual of Typography is no longer published by Imprimerie Nationale. And if you are, we
I have it at home.
in 2014, we actually had someone from Imprimerie Nationale in our group, in our session, and he was called the chief corrector of the Imprimerie Nationale. And what he actually said to us, that I'm not chief corrector, I'm the only corrector of Imprimerie Nationale, and I write advice that people do not follow even in my own company. So it's kind of a situation where there's no pilot in the plane at all at the moment.
Except the Minister of Culture.
Since 15th January this year, and what you have in your hands is a document that was published first as part of a report of Parliament, and then as an independent document. And since then, there has been a lot of media exposure. I would like to say at this stage that there was coordinated communication endeavors between the Ministry and AFNOR since September, I think.
No, October, I think.
October,
Yeah.
okay.
And yeah, so as you said, that we wanted to make the publication as official as possible. That's why we used the Parliament report, which is a very official document made by the delegation from French language each year. So we spoke about this subject here, and later we made this document that you can find here, which has the print of the Ministry of Culture, and is quite official also.
I like your term of cytographie.
Ah!
So a few words about the project, because that's what's going to interest most of you, I think. We are looking at consistency with ISO IEC 9995. We have a scope which is currently restricted to office keywords, which will mean physical keywords, not virtual keywords. On-screen keywords are outside of scope, and the assisted inputs, computer-supported inputs, also outside of scope because they're a different matter. It's not that it is not important, but it's a different matter, and we have a plan to go fast and have a standard, a good standard, but an early standard on the matter, because we've been waiting for too long already. Requirements will address the issue of what characters, what signs need to be covered. That's mostly a requirement on software. What are the signs that are going to be taken into account or supported by the keyboard driver, in which we look for French spelling and typography, and also the spelling and writing of other European Latin-based languages, including French regional languages, some of which are not European, and also general and scientific and technical signs. Without going too far in that direction, we're also going to include more signs than we have today. Part of the requirements will be on the keyboard engraving. Some of the characters will need to be written on the physical keyboard. All people are not going to know that they are able to input them. So that's a very important requirement.
That's the main issue of keyboards right now, is the engraving.
Yeah, this point is very important for us because
For everybody.
people need to find easily if you want the E-O or E, they want to know that it's here on the keyboard, even if it's available. If it's not written, they won't use it. So that is very important.
And however, this will be a different requirement. You will have more characters available in the driver than will be on the keyboard, because there's only so much space available.
We have the same in the Canadian keyboard as well.
We're looking at having a consistency of group behavior and dead key behavior in order to reduce the load on the user's memory.
This point is difficult.
It is.
Because we have made some studies within the working group, and a few studies are not consistent, and they allow different methods for putting capitals with accents. The studies which allow a consistent technique of inputting capital with accents is very very different from the actual keyboard in France. So we will have to choose.
Oh, it's different, yeah.
Yeah.
But in the Canadian keyboard, you all accents. It's easy to have a capital, accented capital.
Yeah, but the choice of putting all accents in dead keys, for example, it's not
all.
easy for French.
Not all.
Yeah.
We would have liked to have 6 fully formed characters, upper and lowercase. We have 5. The rest is 2 dead keys remaining.
Yeah. But there is a way of only dead keys, but I don't think it's realistic.
No, only dead keys will not
it's
be
too
popular.
difficult. Yeah, it's too difficult. And the other way, which is only to get the most characters with direct access.
Direct access is 6 characters actually, which are very, very heavily used.
Yeah.
In the Canadian keyboard, we use 5, and the 5th one you have accent circumflex, which you have to use a dead key.
And we're also looking at having requirements on the layout. It's not yet a written standard, but there is a lot of interest in having a standard that actually specifies a layout, where you can say, this is the way you do it. And we are going to have an ASAT-based layout, and I'm going to explain why later on. But we also are considering having an optional second layout, which would be an ergonomical one, a Dvorak style one, because there has been some feedback on that also.
Like Vipo.
The plan, we had an initial consultation of stakeholders in 2014, but the working group was officially created at the end of 2015, just after the publication of the Parliament of the report to the Parliament of the Ministry. And we have 3 more meetings planned throughout the first semester of this year, after which we hope to have a draft ready for public inquiry. And we're looking at having a publication in early 2017. This, of course, is dependent on how the work progresses. And since we have attracted a lot of media attention, we might have a lot of input during the public inquiry, for instance. We don't know that. So these are not set dates, but that's what we've been communicating now. So we're going to try our best to stick to them. The status of the document will be a French standard, which means that it will be voluntary. You will not have to use it. However, the Ministry has stated that the conformance to the standards might be required in public tenders, which is a very important thing. And also, that's a side note almost, that's almost trivial, but we are looking at having a bilingual French-English document, where the French version will be authoritative, but we think it's very important because many manufacturers will not read French. So we need to have control of how the standard will be translated. Media response since the publication of this booklet has started with social media. The booklet was published on 15th January, which I think was Friday. And over the weekend there was a lot of social media attention. Yeah. And on the next Monday, Le Monde has a blog dedicated to new technologies, and they interviewed us to have some feedback, publish something, after which the BBC published something on their Europe blog. And what's interesting is that the content that they had, both on the Le Monde blog and on the BBC blog, was promoted to the front page. And on the day that the BBC blog note was published, which was the next Thursday, the news was slightly dramatized and put on the bbc.com home page. And it was actually the 5th most read article that day.
It was this booklet?
Yeah, well, it started with the publication of this booklet, yes.
Yes, and there's no other publication about this.
There is a publication of AFNOR in late October, I think.
Yes, we had in the context of the coordination we have with the Ministry of Culture, when the Ministry published their reports to Parliament, they published a press release, and we also had one. We also started something on social media. There was limited attention to that. Didn't really go beyond the first few days of attention. And in January, on the contrary, we did that again. We had to write a new press release, and so did the Ministry. and there was a lot of media attention because after the Le Monde and BBC came the TV, and again the subject, which was filmed for an information channel, was reprised on the main channel of the network, and there was an interview of the minister that same day, and she was interviewed on. She had to talk about the subject as well, so there was a lot of attention. And after that, magazines and regional press and international press came in, even the New York Times, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and we realized that the BBC content was reused across the world, really, and across Europe. And we believe that never has a French standard, which is really just targeted at the French market, has had so much international attention. It's absolutely unprecedented. We are just addressing the French market of 60 million customers.
Yes, in fact, it was in all German newspapers, because otherwise the German standard 2 years ago was not recognized by anybody. So you have a better contact to the press.
Well, it probably has to do with a number of things, and particularly with the misconceptions and misrepresentations, which I think we should talk about a little bit because they are interesting.
Because
they're probably also linked to the way French people see themselves, and with the way people think the French people see themselves outside of France, and also probably with the wording of the booklet, which is very strong. The ministry has actually published a document where they say the French keyboard cannot write the French language, which is a very strong statement to make. It's entirely true, but it's very boldly put, and that has attracted a lot of attention. Common misrepresentations, of course, are in France, everyone wants to replace our keyboard, the AZERTY keyboard, with a QWERTY keyboard. That's again a conspiracy from the US. And very many people have written saying that this was going to be the case, and they didn't want it, they wanted to keep their AZERTY keyboard, as if it were the best keyboard available. That's what we had in France, and I think that we have received messages in that direction. There were a lot of comments below the press articles, and I think the ministry has received a lot of many letters asking that we do not change the AZERTY keyboard.
Yeah.
You know, they have to know the history between why is AZERTY in France and QWERTY in the rest of the world.
Yes.
Just a patent issue at the time. The QWERTY keyboard was built, we didn't want to pay royalties, and they just changed a few letters. But QWERTY was designed to write slow English. AZERTY is just for patent issue, but actually the QWERTY keyboards writes better French. It's better for the frequency of letters for French. It's faster than English. But we had the same issue in Canada when we made a Canadian keyboard. We we have two languages, two linguistic communities, and we had a lot of fight of people saying that the keyboard was too much French because it had 5 fully formed French letters on it. With same kind of issue.
Yes, exactly. And abroad, the response was totally different. The response was amused a lot, saying that basically the French are doing it again, trying to write French where everyone should be writing English, really. And why do they insist on having a keyboard that's different from everyone else? And they saw this as a move to defend the French language against outside aggression. And it's totally different from the actual vision, which is to make the French keyboard that French people use more adapted to globalization, not something against globalization. So these common misrepresentations were very strong, and they transpire in the way that the articles have been written.
By
Anglo-Saxons. No, not only, because people have been inspired by the Anglo-Saxons a lot. And for instance, a lot of Spanish language press has said that basically the French should use the QWERTY keyboard as well, just like the Spanish do. And why do they insist on having something else? So it's not only the Anglo-Saxons. However, there are also...
but AZERTY would not be an issue, it's not AZERTY problem.
That's not the main problem.
It's not the main problem.
But we now, with the feedback that we had from the market in France, we know that there is a strong support for having a keyboard that might be better than the current AZERTY, but still needs to be AZERTY because that's what
Yes.
people use, and they don't want to.
That's why I
address
see
this
that
early.
AZERTY is not the issue, it's the digits are an issue, a big issue.
Yeah. The issues are the characters that you can't type with the keyboard. Actually, like
Also, yeah.
capital with accents,
yeah.
ligatures.
But it's not the fact that it's AZERTY or
No,
QWERTY is not
no,
an issue.
no, it's
Should
not
not
an
be
issue.
an issue.
No, it's not an
You
issue.
should just continue
Yeah.
with a modified
Yeah.
AZERTY.
Yeah, and we should change less possible things because the more we change, and the more users will say.
If the more you change, the more you have to be dictatorial.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it won't work.
Exactly. However, there was also a lot of positive things in the contributions that we received during this media exposure. And for instance, details of how the QWERTY keyboard was created to slow down typing, for instance, was very often repeated. Many people show to be aware of why keyboards look the way they look today. Maybe because Wikipedia is around and people have taken the time to check, but there was a majority of surprised and sometimes shocked comments below the articles, but there was a strong minority of people who had actually done the reading they needed to do and were somewhat knowledgeable about why we were doing this. And we also noted that there was a surprisingly high level of support for the Bepo keyboard, which we thought was very interesting but marginal. And in fact, very, very many people would write saying, you don't have to do anything, the keyboard already exists, it's Bepo. And that's about half the letters that I've received, and that's about 50 letters so far, saying that.
Yeah. It's the same for us. They were all saying, but they didn't know that it already exists. They coexist. So what are you doing? So it's
This is
very
the activists.
no, it's not necessarily the activists.
No.
It's people that say that our contribution is useless because there is something else. But it's fun because in the publication here we mention Bepo, so people say that we don't know about Bepo, but we know about it.
Yes.
They are even part of the.
Yes, question, what is Bepo?
Bepo, I can.
The first letter of the keyboard. It's like a Vorak keyboard, but with letters organized in function of the frequency of
Oh, I
letters
see.
in French.
You can find
I
it
show
back
you a screen.
on the document at the last page.
Okay. So, interesting thing is that not only were comments very strongly in favor of Bepo, or some of them, but the journalists were very open to the subjects. And we thought that maybe something as alien or strange as Bepo would not catch the public's attention or media's attention. On the contrary, every time journalists phoned me to interview me about the subject, they asked for two contacts, one in the Ministry of Culture and Communication, and another one with the Bepo community. And the interesting thing is that the Bepo community is not at all organized to take that load of media attention, so there has been a lot of effort on their part to find the right people to speak in front of Congress, for instance. We've also received a number of voluntary contributions from the world over, really, and we've received industry and research participation offers from the US, from Finland, from Israel, but more may come later. So there's lots of positive feedback. That's about the end of this long presentation. That by the next presentation we'll be able to show you later. But if you'd like to read more about this, I put some links in the presentation that might be diffused or circulated later on.
Actually, to say a bit more about this subject, we are working on a few studies, as I said previously. So we'll see what study goes on the farthest, but it will be difficult to choose between solutions that make some changes, important changes, but are very, very optimal in terms of accessibility, usability, and solutions that will change very, very few things, but they are still quite inconsistent. So it's difficult. I wonder what will get out of this.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
On the sixth page.
Yes. one is that? This one?
666. Next page. I'm interested about the coverage of characters. The last thing is general scientific computer science.
Yes.
We have maybe we have same problem because multiplication symbol is used in textbook
Yes.
for education, but it is not possible to
Yeah.
like that.
Yes.
I have it in the Canadian keyboard.
You have many more on the Canadian keyboard, yes.
So I want to got some kind of hint for your standardization.
In fact, I think we can say probably that's the area of coverage that is the least defined at the moment. We know where we want to go, but we don't have. We have a very clear representation now of what science we want to have on the French language part. We have a 99.99 certain perimeter of what we want to cover in terms of science for other Latin-based languages. But we are not entirely sure exactly how far we want to go with scientific science. We know that we are going to go much further than what we have today, but knowing exactly where we are going is a difficult thing. For instance, I was talking with a senior researcher of physics from the French CNRS on Friday, who wrote to us saying paper was great, so use paper instead. I could call the person and have him report on his usage because that was interesting for us. And surprisingly, he counts Greek letters as being very important for scientific texts, but probably just the first three of them, alpha, beta, gamma, and then the mu, because that's part of the units. And the other ones, he's not too interested, not as much as the others. So it's not very straightforward to define exactly which are the science that you really need, and not everyone has the same needs. Maths and physics needs are not exactly the same, also they're going to be very close, but financial needs are also very important in the professional world, and they will be different.
Yes, maybe
There
you.
was a question by Kel before.
Yes, Yves Neville made a keyboard once, and I thought that was for the French language, wasn't it? And
He was using 51 keys instead of...
okay, so that was not sufficient. Or
He made something about it. You probably considered it.
Well, actually, I looked in our reports, and I realized that AFNOR does not have a copy of the...
I may have one.
So if you do,
Yeah.
I'm interested. I know that it was published in 1985 in a book, but we do not have that in our archives because it was not standardized at the time. At the time, the only standard that existed was that quote-based keyboard, which
Yeah.
was dated back to the 1970s. So it was not implemented as a French standard. But I remember from this keyboard that it has a nice vision in terms of having zones that are more basically spreadsheet oriented or text oriented things.
For mathematical
Yeah.
stuff. Cal?
Yes, regarding the special symbols needed by physics and commercial, they are addressed in 1995 Part 9. So there is a mechanism to access such things, and I don't know how you relied on this, because of course if in the discussion this comes out that there are some symbols more needed, then I think we have to do a revision of the 1995 Part 9 in cooperation with the characters that are needed, because in creating 1995 Part 9 there was not very much input from outside which corrected this. For instance, you had made something for Korean characters, and that is incorporated, but for physical symbols and this we have no input. So this I hope that we can develop 1995 all parts in cooperation with standards, so that if something lacks in 1995, so then we can developed 1995 so that it fulfills the needs of the French as well as that of the Germans. So I hope when there's any cooperation, it has these things also on the agenda.
Globally, the roadmap that we have is really aggressive. We want to progress very fast, and we know how media attention works. I mean, the top of the wave was 3 weeks ago, when I spent practically 1 week just answering journalists and doing nothing else. Now it's a bit further down in the news. So we have to use this media attention, or this public attention, while it exists. So we want to go fast. But we still want to do things properly, and we would be very interested to have this exchange. Interestingly, we've heard that the Belgian authorities also have taken an interest in what we are doing, and would like to consider the possibility of having one francophone keyboard that would cover both the French and the Belgian needs, which are not necessarily the same. Belgium is a multilingual country in a way that France isn't. So we don't know how this is going to happen. And obviously, we have a standard. The Belgians do not have. Well, we're going to have a standard. The Belgians do not have a standard, but maybe their keyboard is regulated. I don't know where the source is, but we're going to have to find ways to work together. If that's going to happen, it might also slow us down a bit to just reach a larger audience and have better international support.
Because my idea also is anything what is beyond the basic layout of the letters, what is QWERTY, or AZERTY, and but all what is beyond this can be an international standard, and this is maybe the outcome will be there is a new French standard or a francophone standard, and then there are requests to adapt 1995. Because it's a longer process, so that in 3 years maybe, then the standard becomes compatible to 1995, because then the necessary changes are made. Because of course we cannot wait for the 1995 to be changed, because that takes 3 years.
Yes, and certainly one of the more difficult questions that was asked all the time was, why now?
Yeah.
Why didn't you do it in the 1990s? And there is no good answer to that question.
I agreed that we could have done it 100 years before, because it dates back to 19th century, the AZERTY presentation. So I read many comments, people saying with humor that the Ministry of Culture was working on subjects that could have been done 100 years ago, but it's still good.
Yeah, a lot of people say that keyboards are dead, but actually that's not the case. That's the only way we used to write. It's very important.
Yeah, most offices use physical keyboards, so it's not going to change in next years. One point is interesting also to say that AFNOR is going to make do a public survey on which characters are the least used on the keyboards, in order to find where we can remap some places on the keyboard to fit in new characters from French. For instance, on Windows keyboards you have this key, line 1, position 1. In the Windows one you have only the two exponent, upper small two. It's a Macintosh, but in the Windows one it's very different. You only have the two, but exponent.
Exponent.
It's an example of key you can remap for other things.
That's the better one.
Why do you want to go through a big survey and not just some statistical analysis of French popular?
I think it's interesting to get some input on what users feel that it's not useful or not needed.
we can survey what the people actually use, but saying what they would use is a different thing. And the survey has two goals really. One is to have some input about what people expect their keywords to do and what changes they would look positively. But the other reason, and maybe the more immediate reason, is to maintain keywords in the center of attention. That people question keywords rather than just use them as if they were invisible. And we don't want keywords to become invisible again. We want people to still have some openness to the fact that they are going to change, maybe marginally. We want to assess the margin for maneuver that we have. How marginal should the changes remain in order for the new standard to be accepted? And so that's the kind of things that we try to measure. It's not going to be a scientific survey by any means. It's really trying to initiate a debate and to get people to talk.
Yeah, well, the social networks.
I don't know how you will do this fast, but in Canada, when the first time I attended a meeting on standard keyboard, I thought at the end of the afternoon we would have a standard. It took 5 years. This was a really big fights. So I encourage you not
Thank you.
to be discouraged.
I have a question. There is another version of baffle,
Yes.
except, I mean, the number of the character key is more than the US keyboard. I mean, for example,
This one.
yes. So
This
in
one
this
here
case-
should be placed, if you want to be ergonomic, you need to place it at the other end on the top row.
The number is different. I
Yes,
think.
well that's the 105th key.
Mhm.
And Bebo uses here this key to write a letter that could only be written with this and that. Actually, the French keyboard as it exists today does not have this as a separate entry. We always write this in 2 presses. So the reason they've done this is that this is rather a frequent sign in the French language.
Yeah, but it's badly placed there.
It's badly placed, but
There, if you want to have a fully formed, you should have the U grave. So to avoid to have a grave
yes,
accent.
but they place it differently. And this is a simplified schema, by the way. There's a more complex one. And the idea behind their calculation was that since this is a key that might be missing from a US keyboard, for instance,
Yeah, it is.
it does not need to be indispensable. It has to be replaceable by other combinations.
Yeah.
Right.
For example, as in Korea, there's no ISO type keyboard. So, for example, all keyboard has a wrong shift key, left shift key. So in that case, we cannot use the baffle keyboard layer.
But you can remove this and you will be able to type this
Yes.
character.
The
Well,
other,
you are able with the circumflex accent with an E. You know that key, that key here. So that's what he was explaining. If you
Okay.
if you don't have this key, just remove.
There's no problem.
No problem.
Yes, no problem.
There's an alternate way of entering the character.
And how about the
This one.
yeah?
Yeah.
It's kind of a slash.
I think is that a slash? Is it
That's a slash.
That's a slash.
I think it's a dead key for getting the slashed characters.
Oh, the
Because you already have it.
the Danish E.
Yeah. I think because the E is on the 9, the regular one.
Yeah. And I have a question about the space.
Yes. In
Yes.
French, when you use punctuation with 2 parts, like double points, you have to put before this punctuation a space that can't go on back on the right. Unbreaking space.
No
Because,
break space.
Yeah, no break space. In English, you just stick the double points with the word. In French, no, there is space, but this space can't be broken. It can't put the punctuation at the start of the line. So this we use a lot of.
So in fact, should be a fine space.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is the fine space you have here. That's the full keep map of Hugo. This is the long break space, and this is the thin space here, which you access through Alt, GR, and space key. If you're going to access this slash, and the key here is missing, you just press this one instead, and then space. So it's also replaceable. It's less easy than with this one.
So all the red characters
all the red here are dead keys.
Okay.
How can I activate the dead key?
Just press the dead
press
key.
the dead key and then a character, then a letter, and it forms a. If you do this with the where is the E here? This with this gives this.
Okay.
I understand in Canada that you add something like 5 accented characters,
Upper and lower case.
upper and lower case, but then there are more than that in French. You are doing the dead key, and what is your experience with that? Is that acceptable to people? Are people happy? Yes.
People have used that in France and in Canada for 100 years.
Yeah. Okay. So you're happy with
We're
it?
not happy, but it's
Okay. That's
the best we can have.
okay.
Some guy proposed a 56 key keyboards on which you could write without the keys.
Yeah.
But that was, and Yves Neuville proposed a 51 key keyboard in which you can have the E circumflex as well, so you have 6 French letters like this. The 6 most used, but there are actually 13, 14 actually,
Yeah.
French accented letters.
And it's interesting because I've read the statistics of usage for the French language, and there are 2 or 3 characters like that are very, very much used, more than standard alphabet characters. The most one is acute, which is the 10th or 11th most used character.
Which is in my name.
Yeah. Yes. And the second one is the A with a grave accent.
Yeah.
I have another question. In the case, there are kind of level 4 standard.
Group 2.
There are 2 groups of 2 levels each.
There is no level 4.
There's no level 4. Basically, you have the Alt GR key is actually the group 2 selection key, and the capital key is, or the shift key is the level 2 selection key. So you have group 1 level 1, group 1 level 2, group 2 level 1, group 2 level 2.
Group 2 level 1.
You also always have a maximum of 4 signs on each group.
Yeah, you could have 3 levels for group 1, 3 levels for group 2, and as many groups as you want. In 9995 we defined the way you switch group. We defined some groups with the 9995 part 10. We defined more groups than this, and this there are 2 groups. But it's always a group as a maximum of 3 characters, not 4. Because you only have 25 fingers, not 50.
Most of us.
And I have a question. How can I input this character?
It's alt graphic there with the shift D. Shift D.
With 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
But normally you should be able to toggle the alt graphic. I don't know if you do that way. But
No.
you it would be more economic
It
if you
doesn't
toggle
match.
because you have to use 25 fingers.
But in that case, physically, this is kind of level 4.
Yeah, you can think of it as
Mhm.
level 4, but if you do that, you cannot have more than 2 groups. And we wrote that in 995. If you have a case where there is only only 2 groups, you can label that way.
To give an example of what, that's one of the studies that we have. So please look at it and then forget it. This document will self-destruct in 5 seconds because it stops definitely. This is one of the things we've been looking at. You see that it is an AZT keyboard layout with lots of dead keys added everywhere. It's not very easy to have that many dead keys on this side of the keyboard because that's where you have the antigraphic key. So it basically means that you are going to have to do a lot of gymnastics with the right hand. I didn't realize Ken was filming this. But
You will
yeah.
broadcast that in the US.
But you see that
Not enough resolution to get the detail. I see.
Yes, 14 camera.
Oh no.
Just kidding.
It's not complete. It's just to try and make a few cases. You know, for instance, using this key, which is practically unused on the French keyboard today, to use the dollar sign, which is used on some spreadsheet applications on top of being a monetary symbol, or in programming, the hashtag as well. This is one of the places where we can put this sign, which is useful to write some very some particular European languages, such as Romani, the Gypsy language, or some Lappic languages. So we have various options there. It's not a complete. We've also considered having a one key press to access this complex sign, which is a sign used in one of the French regional languages. Some keyboards exist with this as one letter. It's not necessarily a good practice to have a ligature of that sort, since behind that key there's no actual ligature in Unicode, but an actual sequence of 3 characters. So
That's
that's Breton, yes.
And there is even a Britain keyboard which is called the QWERTY because the first letter instead of the A or the Q is the C H. It's pronounced so it's QWERTY.
No, yeah. This is self-destructing now. Beeple have also been challenged because they have an excellent coverage of characters, but they do lack a couple characters in order to be fully compliant with all official regional languages of Europe. And for instance, the kind of Z sign which is shown is not on their layout. So right now on the Beeple mailing list there are loads of messages every day back and forth trying to find a place for this and a place for the thesis sign, and they're trying to make it complete for standardization. It's really difficult for a group of people who are all voluntary and not organized to have this kind of debates in a very short
But we should agree that this keyboard, the Beeple keyboard, is really good for ergonomics. It's impressive. They have made an impressive work. Unfortunately, it's very different from the keyboards we use, QWERTY, AZERTY. But if you take the time to learn a new keyboard, it's incredible. It's really incredible because we have all the keys, the most useful keys online, the middle line, and it's very, very. You can see some videos on YouTube of people typing with Beeple, and you see that the fingers doesn't move. They always stay at the same place, and it's very impressive. Very impressive.
to write my name. My full name is not ergonomic at all. Takes a lot. Always in the corners.
That's true.
You said alt drop key is used as
Group
group
selection.
selections for 9995-1, maybe 2. to define algebra as a level 3 selection.
It's not entirely incompatible. You can really find. I think it is compatible with 1995 to redefine algebraic as a group 2 selector.
Yes, Carl?
Yes, in fact, we have a special keyboard symbol for this use of the RGRK.
In Canada, we use algraphic also, but we use for level 3, but we have a group select. We use the right control.
The other color carries.
Yeah, we use it as a group select. So we group select, then you type your character, and then you're back in group. So it toggles for one character only.
In Korean keyboard, actually we don't have an algebra key, but instead of that key, we use as a kind of a group selection. I mean the Korean and English, we kind of toggle.
Yes.
We switch the keyboard layer. So, but I try to make the revised standardization standard for Korean
I
keyboard.
think for groups, my comment would be to use a different algraphic should. Well, of course you don't have a level 3, but there are groups with level 3. You should have it. So in 9995 we did not standardize that because it's too complex between different languages. We say you need to have a group select mechanism. But it would be better to have a group select, and the group determines if it's toggling for only one character or for Russian, for example. Russian is self-defined as one group which toggles permanently. And then in Canada, the second group toggles only for the next character.
So my comment is, I think the level 3 selection key plus group selection key should be needed.
Or a mechanism.
Yeah.
But it would be more ergonomic to have a key dedicated for group selection.
For me, I try to make a standard using the level 3 because I want the input for the many kind of mathematical symbols or something like that. But so I try to make algebra kind of concept of algebra for selecting level 3, and plus we should have group selection, for example, switching the keyboard layer to Korean, English, or some other country's language.
You mean a dedicated key?
Dedicated key?
Yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah.
But
So-
if you don't have a dedicated key, you need to have a means to switch to another group.
Yeah, so
You need to have a mechanism to switch to another group.
could
So
you explain this?
you should plan this group selection more than this one, because you can just toggle for one group. You cannot switch to Russian or to Greek.
Okay.
And I have a
You need a
question. What's
mechanism.
the meaning of super key? Super.
Well, it's just this is remember, at the beginning this was developed by free software kind of people. They just wanted to develop a keyboard driver. They were not counting on having hardware. So this had to be adaptable to both the Windows or the Macintosh keyboards, and in that particular place did not have the same symbol. The Windows keyboard has the window key, and the Apple has another key. So that's the way they organize it to be agnostic, to be neutral. It doesn't mean anything particular. It's a system-related key anyway. It's not supposed
Kind
to
of a Windows
input
key
have-
or
Right.
Yeah, so OS key.
Windows keys is programmable as well, like all the others.
It is, but if you do that, you're going to have interference with shortcuts that people might use for that system or applications.
Probably. I think there is a way to disable the Windows button even from the Windows point of view.
So some issues that we have are the fractions here, for instance. They have three fractions, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4. We could have more, but there are many more in Unicode. We do not use them very frequently because we use the metric system. You use a lot of fractions when you use inches, particularly in the US and Burma, which are the only two countries where that is sufficient.
Burma use the
yes.
US?
Yeah.
It was the British.
Well, they use the British imperial signs. We don't necessarily need those, so it's unclear if we are going to have those, for instance. But there are a lot of clever things in this keyboard as well, which do not show here. For instance, if you use the dead key for the circumflex accent and then a number, it's going to give you the exponent number. Because it looks like what you would have on some calculating machines or early systems or programming languages as well. So they have a lot of, and of course there is the reverse, which is this one. And if you use that one, you're going to have the index instead. A lot of things fall through like that. There's also a way, I don't remember exactly which, to input Greek letters. One of the, I think this one, see the mu sign is actually a dead key. If you want to have the mu for micron, for instance, you're going to press that one and that space to have the mu sign. But if you press this plus A, you're going to have the letter alpha. That's very handy for biology, for instance, where you have a lot of, or organic chemistry, where you have a lot of alternatives that you need to signal with the Greek letters.
Do you remember how many keys that can be accessed by net keys in Maple? It's incredible.
It's a huge number.
Yeah, it's like
You've got
200.
somewhere on the website.
There's the Neuvid keyboard, they used to have a combination key, combined key, which you combine. You can combine any numbers of two characters, and it gives one character.
Well, that's something that's that people talk about a lot because it's on it's Linux systems.
Yeah.
It's not very widespread, and while the idea of having graphic as a group selector is actually derived from the best practices of the Linux world and Macintosh world because they have that a lot. But the compose key does not really have a lot of traction in working.
Compose key can be software defined.
It can be something.
Yes, I read on the website for Maple, more than 500 characters available with 20 dead keys.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
But it would be more general to have a full group select, which could give you access to any number of characters. You look at part 10 of 9995, you will see. Actually, we could, if we wanted, that was a project at the time to have a way to standardize the group access. You could say group this way, group this character, and then just with the 48 keys, you have 48 groups you could define if you wished with this. 48 groups of 48 keys, or even more.
That's the kind of French keyboard layout where you have this key no one ever uses, almost. This is where the @ sign is. It's not very handy. We have a proud pound sign here that people hardly ever use as well. Some people do, but it doesn't really need to be that well placed. So there's a lot of people don't even know what that is. It's a monetary sign.
That's a
people don't know what that
Sputnik.
is. So sorry.
Yeah, that's a Sputnik. That's the history of this character was that the only reason why when during the Cold War on the ISO 646 character set, they didn't want to see the dollar sign. They wanted to have an alternate, which was something which nobody would use to represent any currency sign.
Okay.
So that's and after the Cold War, they say since we have so many American devices, we don't need it anymore.
Ah,
But it's there because people used it for
uh-huh.
all kinds of
So you mean the currency sign, current sign?
Yes.
Yeah.
currency sign was there as an alternate to the dollar sign in the first
But
7-bit character set.
not used anymore.
No, it's not
You,
implemented.
it's just fancy use if you
Yeah.
want to put fancy characters,
Yeah.
but
I've
there's no
never seen
use.
it implemented. I've never seen a
There is
keyboard
no,
that-
there is no use even in Russia. Was never implemented as a currency.
Some people use it as a dead key to make monetary signs.
Yeah, it could
this,
be.
This plus E would give euro, this plus
Yeah.
T could be Togo, for
Yeah.
instance.
Okay.
But that's very hard to, it's very hard to remember, remember it. This sign, I wonder if you've seen that before.
Section sign.
Yes.
Paragraph.
That is common in Germany for paragraphs of laws.
Common
Exactly.
in French also.
In common French also, but apart from those two
Paragraph
languages
in
that
the
I've
text
seen,
of law, yeah.
not in French law. Maybe
But in Canada, yes. In French.
Okay.
It's a, but it's a section sign in English, but in French it's paragraph.
It's a paragraph, yeah.
But in French, we use
It's
the
French we used to use that. It may have changed in the last.
No, in legal texts,
Yeah.
when you want to quote paragraphs of legal text, you sometimes have this less often than they used to.
Yeah, but
If
not-
you
not
were
in
if you
France.
were a lawyer,
Not in
you would
France.
know.
At all?
If you were a lawyer, you would know.
I studied law for 7
Oh, really?
years. I've never seen one time this thing. Never. So
Really?
Okay,
it must be
so-
practical in English law,
No,
common
no, no,
law.
but not
not in
we
France.
don't in Quebec we don't use the common law. We use the French civil.
In French, when you say an article, you say article 232-3, alinéa 1, c'est AL, alinéa, but you don't use this.
Paragraph. But we use the Napoleonic Code in Quebec, and we use this character.
Yeah, that's fine.
So it's out of use in France now.
No, it's out of use because in
Out of
law
use, but
we
it
use
has
alinéa.
been used.
Yeah.
It's still used outside of France
Yeah.
in French.
Yeah.
I've seen it in French books as well when I was young.
So there are other things that are remarkable. You see here there's the lower than and greater than signs, which are often used in programming as a pair, are one on top of the others. Whereas the other signs that are used as pairs are, you know,
Long
that's
distance.
Yeah, long
that's
distance.
a long distance relationship. See, you can fit in a number of line of codes before you reach the other one.
Yes.
And this one, the square brackets are difficult to access because it's not art graphics. So there's a lot of things that programmers are angry about on the French keyboard. If we're going to listen to programmers, they're going to have all those signs very prominently featured on the keyboard. That's not going to happen because that's real estate. But we do have some space.
The levels we picked, right?
Sorry?
The
Level 3.
level 3.
Yes. That's level three.
And you have the micron, which is not very used also. It's a physical, it's useful, but it's on level 2. I don't think it deserves a level 2 for this.
Not only that, but of course it's used in the metric system. You needed to have the millionth of the units. But if you're going to have that, you're going to have more signs in the scientific
Yeah.
system. Such as, for instance, the ohm sign for electric resistance, which is not on this keyboard. So there are quite a few inconsistencies that we're going to address. And in that respect, we more or less know where we're going. The issue is really, are we going to have closely equal to sign? Are we going to have this lower or equal than 2? No. Are we going to have that one? Are we going to have this one? Or are we
If you
going to have that
do
one as
real
the
mathematics, you need all this,
Yes.
but not for programming.
Not for programming. But the issue is, maths teachers used to write tests by hand and have them photocopied. Now they use digital blackboards. So they need to enter those signs through a computer keyboard. Nowadays, the only solution they have is the Windows character map, or something even more complicated. So that's some of the uses that we need to take into account. And of course, not everyone will be happy with the result.
In Korea, I want to explain some situation. We always use the X instead of multiplication.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yes.
looks like the same. But most people use the X, but I use the actual one on the Canadian
Yeah, yeah.
keyboard, but people don't notice. They don't see the difference.
Yeah.
We use
The
this.
issue, of course, in the equation you have x as one of the variables.
But if you search in the text this thing, you won't find it with an X.
Yeah. We use the star instead of
Star
the
is in
asterisk.
programming.
Yes.
Since programming language.
Yes.
At the time where there were only 96 characters in the ASCII character set. That's the reason. Because otherwise they would have used the multiply sign that everybody learned.
Yeah.
One question is about the digits, having them on the uppercase. Isn't that
That's bad.
bad? Yeah. Every time I use a French keyboard, that really
That's very bad.
irritates me.
I understand, but that's also something we're very used to. So it's
Yeah.
not particularly. I mean, I've switched to a Canadian keyboard myself, so I'm used to having the digits on level 1. But it is quite a step to make this change. That's the first thing. And the other thing is, if you're going to do that, you lose a lot of direct access to other signs that people are very attached to. If I'm going back to the
But they are less used than digits.
We have a study
no,
with
not on the other T keyboard.
we have a study with the digits on the level 1 group 1 and it's feasible. Everything fits. So it's more political matter than for example.
If you're going to have the digits in group 1, level 1, you're going to have to move the acute accent, for instance, which is one of the most frequent characters in the French language.
Like
so that's
like
going
we
to
have in the Canadian keyboard.
exactly. But in terms of usage, it's going to be a huge change for the user, and there's going to be a learning curve, which is likely to be a reason for the standard to fail. And interestingly, the Bepo keyboard has had the same choice that we have on the ASCII keyboard, which is to have the digits on level 2. And recently, on the mailing list, they had this debate: is that's not the occasion we need to move the digits to level 1?
I would
And
say
very,
so.
and very quickly they concluded that they didn't want to.
But the result of this is you see a lot of French people put the uppercase, blocking the uppercase, and they write in uppercase all the time with the digits,
Yeah.
which is very bad.
Yeah, very bad. Because you can't use accents.
That's very bad. It's not a good. This is not a good solution for the digits, unless you are sure you have a keypad. But on portable keyboards, there are no portable
Do you mean
computers.
the
You don't have
digit?
keypad.
In this case, digit is not a level 1.
Yes,
or
yes.
level 2.
It's level 2.
Level 2 is
As-
very
as-
bad.
as
Very,
it
very
is,
bad.
It's
I
exactly
think those who say it's correct, it's because they are conservative.
Yes.
Because ergonomically speaking, it's very bad.
Could you explain why the Bepo,
Mhm.
the digital numbers as the level 2?
I would have to look on the main archive to see the history. I don't have a particular explanation.
That's
I think
not a rational thing.
if you look at the way it is on this screenshot, you could easily imagine having them swapped, having the symbols at level 2 and the digits level 1. It's much more difficult to do that on the ASCII keyboard because
Yeah,
you
the
have-
ASCII is different.
it's different. But in that case, you could argue that in that particular case, the Bepo, which is entirely new, it was really designed from the ground up. In that particular case, it has the conservatism of the French keyboard and hasn't questioned something that they should have.
That's right. That's my thing.
And they know that. They're not going to be able to change it. Well, not in V1 anyway. They are considering a V2 Bepo, but that's not going to be in place by the time we publish the standard. So.
That's a bad mistake.
This is last topic of working group 1 meeting.
Today, yes. Today, but on Wednesday.
We have
afternoon.
enough time to discuss it.
Well, I see you have a lot of interest, which is great. So you see, they have also implemented some rare, almost European languages like Azeri. That's you only find this in the Azeri language.
Oh, okay.
This one. So they have a huge coverage. They have the old long S, which is only used in historical texts if you want to be very thorough. There's a lot in there. You have the subscribed.
Why 2 sharp S? Is it because there is an uppercase sharp?
Yes, that's an uppercase. It probably doesn't show very well, but it's an uppercase.
That used to be used in French until the 18th century, 19th century. That's long S.
And could you explain the upper left one? Left 2 dashes. What's the difference between?
Sorry.
Dash 2 dashes.
This one?
The below.
This one?
No. Oh.
Dash is
right.
Oh, sorry.
Dash, kind of dash.
I'm not sure.
There's the M dash and the N dash, and that's
I think yes. I think one of them is probably this one. Is
maybe
the M
one
dash.
is a minus sign. This is also another one.
That's the one.
I see. That's the minus.
That's the minus.
Okay.
Because it's with the other operators.
That's correct.
And
then
that's
it
probably
says-
the M dash, and that's probably the N dash.
Yes.
Because the N dash is
Ah.
more used in French than in English.
Dash and dash.
Yes, that's
M dash, M dash.
Yes.
Right?
M dash is a very long one, and N dash is a less
Yeah.
long one. The difference doesn't show here, probably because the software also tries to that way.
You need to know it anyway.
Yeah. And it's not like you need them very often. You need that one a lot. If you want to
Yeah.
have good French typography, this is rather rare in French. It's more often used in English than in French, actually.
Yeah. And also, in our ISO standard, they use a M dash,
Yes.
separating the part. Or
Right.
But in these 2 keys, which one is minus?
The first one.
No, that's is it? No. Is it minus or is it negative? Okay, this will be the minus, and that will be negative.
Negative. Different?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is different in Unicode.
Minus 5 is
Minus-
different from
Negative 5.
2
Negative
plus minus 5.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
In Unicode it is.
Yeah. But it goes with the digit. It goes with the number. It's an integral part of the number.
Yeah.
The other one is an operator, an arithmetic operator. Minus 5 exists by itself. You don't need to make any arithmetic operation.
In the case, use the blue minus 5.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Yeah, the shortest one is the operator.
What about
Then you can distinguish it. Then you do not remove the number.
what about plus? Then there is also a plus.
Also.
There's
No, plus is it's if you don't have a sign, it's by itself. 5 is positive by default.
But we say
less,
it's-
less mandatory than the minus.
we say it's plus 20 today, or
But normally you write 20, not plus
Yeah.
20. But you could have the same.
Hmm.
Should exist also.
One of the things that's been criticized on this keyboard as well is the fact that the W is very far out on the right, which is not a problem if you write French, but most French people have to write English sometime, and if you want to write English or German or Dutch, it's very complicated because it really needs
Well,
to stress.
the same
far away.
problem as QWERTY.
Yeah, but
QWERTY is not easy for English people.
no, not
You-
particularly, but at least the W is not. It's less far away from the
It's
center.
less,
than
a
this
little
one.
bit less far away.
Because,
Just
yeah.
one character less.
Because the resting position of the index finger is here.
The J.
The T.
The T on this one is the T.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4,
4 sides out. 5 sides
Five.
out.
The other one is 3 out.
Just 3, yes.
The another problem is with the digits. If you will be 2 autonomic, then you make not 1, 2, 3, but 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, because then the 0 and the 1 is in the middle where it can be reached more easy.
Economically, yes.
Yes.
It's you use the 0 more often than the 9, and almost as often as the 1.
Yes.
Really?
So-
And they are outside. Yeah,
Really?
Yes. Yes. The 0 and the 1 are used more often than the other numbers, and they are on the extreme outside, and that's not ergonomic. And
No.
so, if you can make 6,
That-
7, 8,
That's a good, that's the first time I hear that, but
Yeah.
it's a good.
and if you say if you go to the how often it is, then it will be a more complicated sequence. But for the people who search them by looking at, it's the best compromise to make 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you have 0 and 1 in the middle.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's very different.
But it's easy to recognize because it's only
The sequence is maintained.
the sequence is maintained.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Mm.
That's right.
There are many more things that you can do with the keyboard. You can just run all
Mm.
the some keyboard layouts are really this one is already particular in the sense that it has a lot of characters that are non-letters at the center, which is very non-traditional. But some of them really have spacing characters. Here, for instance, it's
But when you start talking with more and more people,
yes,
it will never,
never ends.
never end.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, that's why.
We have been 5 years on
I
something
know.
which is simple.
Maybe in 5 years' time I will be holding the same presentation.
I hope not.
I hope not. But we also have to listen, and that's one of the reasons why we are going to do this survey. We really want to have this reality check of what people expect, which is as little change as possible for most of them.
But you will have a lot of.
We will have a lot of thank you. A lot of feedback. I
A lot of
suppose.
feedback which would be contradictory, like we have in Canada.
Yes.
And I have a question, do you have a plan to make on-screen keyboard based on the backbone?
There are some that exists on Android. I'm not sure about Apple.
There is.
There is?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in the case, this very small key, because they have a 12, so.
I don't know exactly how they do it.
Mhm.
I'm not sure.
I know
And
on my GPS they have a lot of different number of keys varies from country to country. And the keys are larger or smaller depending on,
Yeah.
and you have group switching, so you can switch on a Garmin, you can switch from any number of layouts.
This layout has really been, well, the engine of this layout is really ergonomy. How to write with minimum numbers of move with your 10 fingers. So it's really designed to be written with 10 fingers. That's okay for
that's
tablets, for instance, where you might also type with 10 fingers. But on a smartphone, where you don't have that kind of possibility, it's probably not a very good layout anyway. It's probably not the best layout to write with 2 thumbs. It's also probably not a very easy layout to swipe words. Because you have all the vowels on the same side, all the consonants on the same side. So you're going to probably go back and forth a lot, and it's not going to be very specific. So certainly it's very well suited to one usage, and therefore less suited for others. But an on-screen tablet keyboard could be great, because you would have the right space and enjoy the same kind of benefits that people say they enjoy when writing on a physical keyboard.
Problem of on-screen keyboards is always the field.
if sorry, if the keyboard takes too much room on the screen, you don't have access to all the fields. That's a big problem. That nobody seems to address.
The problem I have is that my system seems to decide when I'm finished typing and takes the keyboard away entirely and I can't get it back. That's very annoying. That's another matter entirely. That's for the matter you discussed this morning.
Some years ago, the Korean guy, Jae Wang, he actually proposed to use small set of keys to cover all the languages, alphabets. For Koreans, that works. And he claims that English and other languages also can be covered by his small keyboard.
How many keys?
40, less than 12,
12.
12,
No,
12, yes.
Actually,
It's probably workable, but may not always ergonomical. Maybe it works better for Korean.
no, he made only for the Latin America. Yeah, not Korea.
But it would
Korea-
not be very ergonomical for the Latin based
Because
languages.
his idea is the more frequently used letter is
In different languages.
yeah, but not my idea. His idea is the several maybe he thinks the Latin alphabet used in country have a similar frequency.
He has some empirical data.
Which is not true. Between French and English, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
For instance,
The
French-
W is very, very, very much used in English.
Yes.
It's almost not used in French.
That's why his business is not booming.
Just to give you an idea, French and English share a huge number of common words. We have a huge vocabulary in common, and in spite of that, the distribution of characters is very different. So you can imagine between languages that have nothing in common. The distribution of characters is very different between French and Italian, whereas Italian is a very easy language to understand for a French person. It's very close, but still very different. So I can understand that you have this preconception, and to some extent it's probably true, but not to an extent that is significant for the users in actual use.
That's not my idea.
And
That's a good try, but probably not. He has to go through many countries to be sure.
And even in the case of Russian and Ukrainian, they both use the Cyrillic alphabets, but they differ in 2 or 3 letters only. But those letters are so frequent that they can't have the same keyboard. It wouldn't work.
Okay, so
Thank you very much for your very
it's
interesting
over. We
comments.
will
Yes.
see. Well, tomorrow we meet with the working group.